I have thought a lot about the concept of momentum. How things begin to move and then continue moving not because you're still choosing for them to move, but because stopping requires an active intervention and you keep not making it. How much of what we experience as fate is actually just deferred agency, the accumulated cost of all the moments we could have halted something but didn't. This story is about a friendship I destroyed. Not through betrayal, not through a single terrible act. Through momentum. Through the accumulation of small escalations that I could have interrupted at any point and didn't. Her name was Claire. We had been friends for 11 years, which is long enough that a friendship develops its own grammar, its own specific language, its own understood references, its own rules about what you say and how. Our grammar included something I now recognize as problematic: we competed. Not in an acknowledged way. Not in a way either of us would have used that word for. But looking back, the friendship had a competitive undercurrent that was always there. We were in the same field, writing and content, and we were at roughly the same level of our careers. We shared contacts and opportunities, and sometimes we went for the same thing. The friendship contained, woven through it, a quiet ongoing negotiation about who was more successful, more recognized, more ahead. For most of the 11 years, this was manageable. It lived mostly below the surface, expressed in small ways, a slight edge in the voice when the other person had a win, a slightly warmer response to setbacks than pure friendship would require. Neither of us ever named it, and naming it might have helped. The year things broke, we were both going after the same major commission. A brand campaign with a large budget and significant visibility. We both knew the other had submitted. We'd both been vague about the details. The first time in 11 years we'd actively competed for something and both known it. I got the commission. Claire didn't. I called her to tell her myself, because I thought that was the right thing, better from me than from someone else. And she was gracious. She said the right things. She congratulated me. But something shifted in the register of our friendship after that. Almost imperceptible, but I could feel it. I should have brought it up directly. I should have named the tension instead of letting it accumulate. I knew the shift was there. I felt it every time we talked. But bringing it up felt risky, felt like it would require both of us to acknowledge the competitive undercurrent that we'd pretended didn't exist, and I wasn't sure I wanted to open that. So I left it. And it grew. Over the following months, Claire began doing something that I found, and I want to be honest about my response to this, because my response was part of the problem, genuinely hurtful. She started publicly crediting my success to luck and connections. Not crudely, nothing quotable. But in the specific language of our industry, in comments on posts and in conversations I heard about through mutual people, language that subtly repositioned my success as circumstantial. She wasn't saying I was untalented. She was saying the outcome wasn't about my talent. I escalated instead of addressing it. I started doing something similar in reverse. Undermining her credibility in professional conversations. Not outright dismissing her work, I was too skilled at language for that, but framing things in ways that created doubt. Casting uncertainty on her judgment or her approach. Using the competitive vocabulary of our industry to quietly position her as less serious, less reliable. This went on for 5 months. We were both doing it. We were both, I think, aware that the other was doing it. And neither of us stopped, because stopping would require either confrontation or concession, and neither of us chose either. Each individual thing I said felt like a justified response to what she'd said. That's how escalation sustains itself. You're always responding to the last move, never examining the game. You're never the one who started it. You're never the one who's choosing to continue it. You're just reacting. Except that's not true. Each response was a choice. Each choice moved us further down a road that I could see, clearly, was not good. And I kept walking. The moment it ended wasn't dramatic. A mutual colleague mentioned, in passing, something Claire had said about me. It wasn't outrageous, by that point neither of us was saying outrageous things. But it was just specific enough to make visible the full architecture of what we'd been doing to each other. And I felt something I hadn't expected, not anger. Grief. Grief for the friendship. Grief for the 11 years. Grief for the version of us that had existed before the competition had gotten so loud we could no longer hear anything else. I called Claire. I said what I needed to say, and she said what she needed to say, and it was the most honest conversation we'd had in perhaps 3 years. We acknowledged the undercurrent. We acknowledged what we'd each done. We were both, I think, relieved to stop pretending. But we couldn't put it back together. Some trust, once damaged in specific ways, becomes structural. The scaffold you'd need to rebuild on is the thing that's compromised. We tried, for a few months. The ease was gone. We were too careful with each other, too aware of the ways we'd been careless. We stopped talking about a year after that phone call. Not dramatically. Just gradually, the way things fade when both people have stopped maintaining them. What I think about most, when I think about Claire and what we did to each other, is the number of moments where I could have stopped. Not the big moments, not the phone call, not the final fade. The small ones. The moments between the commission and the escalation. The moment when I first felt the competitive tension intensifying and chose not to name it. The moment I made the first of the quiet undermining comments, which felt, at the time, like a reasonable response to what she was doing to me. Every single one of those moments was a fork. Every single one offered a path toward a different outcome. I didn't take them. I kept moving forward, and I told myself each individual step was justified, and I never pulled back to see the direction I was moving in. That's the thing about momentum, it doesn't feel like momentum when you're inside it. It feels like a sequence of justified responses. It feels like reacting rather than choosing. And that framing removes accountability from each individual step and distributes it into some vague sense of things just happening. Things don't just happen. We make them happen. One small justified response at a time. If I'd stopped earlier, at almost any point, I believe Claire and I would still be friends. Not perfectly. Not without having navigated something difficult. But still talking. Still there for each other. I didn't stop in time. And by the time I was ready to stop, the damage done made stopping feel like arriving at a scene rather than preventing one. What I've carried forward from this is a different kind of attentiveness. An alertness to momentum in my relationships, to the moments when a dynamic is escalating and I'm participating in the escalation and calling it something else. Those moments are the actual decision points. Not the moments when everything has already accelerated past fixing. The decision point is always earlier than you think. And the cost of waiting, of telling yourself just one more step, just one more response, just one more, is something you don't fully understand until you're standing in the silence left by something that used to be there and isn't anymore. Stop earlier. That's what I would tell myself. Stop when it's still recoverable. Stop in time. I've thought a lot about what I could have said to Claire at any of those earlier forks. What the conversation might have looked like if I had interrupted the momentum rather than contributed to it. I think it would have been uncomfortable. I think both of us would have had to acknowledge the competition that neither of us had ever named. I think we would have had to say things like, "I'm jealous sometimes, and I know that's not generous, and I'm telling you because I'd rather you know than feel it without knowing its source." That kind of honesty is vulnerable. It requires showing someone a version of yourself that isn't entirely flattering. It requires trusting that they'll stay, or accepting that they might not, and choosing the truth anyway. I didn't trust it. And so I chose the quiet management of the competitive tension over the messy, vulnerable truth of naming it. And the management failed. As management of suppressed emotion always does, eventually. What I've built since, in the friendships that have survived and in the new ones that have grown, is a different practice. A practice of naming the thing that's awkward before it accumulates. Saying, I noticed I felt some envy about that, and I want to say it out loud because I don't want it to sit between us. Saying, I think I'm being competitive right now and I'm not sure why. Let's talk about it. Those conversations are uncomfortable. Every single time. And every single time, they bring me closer to the person I'm having them with rather than further. Because what people actually want, what I actually want, isn't perfect, easy friendship. It's friendship that can hold the real things. The complicated things. The things that are less generous or less flattering but true. The friendships that can hold those conversations are the ones that last. The ones that can't, where both people are managing images and narratives rather than actually seeing each other, are the ones that fall apart under their own weight. It's just a matter of when. Claire and I ran out of time to learn that together. Maybe we would have found it eventually. Maybe the 11 years would have eventually produced the honesty that could have saved us. Maybe. But momentum doesn't wait. And the moment to interrupt it is always now. Not after one more response. Not after the dynamic has played out a little further. Now. Before the scene sets. Before it becomes something you have to live in rather than something you chose.